Welcome back to the Intentional Intern podcast. Super excited to be with you guys as always. I feel like I say that every episode, but still rings true. And as we're around the time of Thanksgiving, I have a lot to be thankful for of everybody who listens in. And I'm thankful of the conversation that we have with today's guest, Maya Alford-Hill. Maya is a film student at Berkeley City College, and she's passionate about film production and storytelling. Beyond that, she's also done some screenwriting and marketing on the side. Currently, she is a radio intern at KGPC, Peralta Community Radio. In this episode, Maya and I talk about the origins of her love for film, how she does storytelling, some projects she's working on, and more. For those who want to connect with Maya, you can find her LinkedIn linked below. And with that, you guys should also check out the Hybrina series on Spotify and on KGPC 96.9 FM at 10 PM PST. You should also check out their TikTok and Instagram accounts that are coming soon. With that, let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Hi, Maya. How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm doing well. Super excited to have you on the podcast today. I am so excited to get into the topics that we're going to talk about. And I would first love for you to introduce yourself to the audience. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I want to say, first off, thank you for having me. And hi, everyone. I'm Maya. And currently, I am studying film production and doing a bit of screenwriting on the side and a bit of marketing. So I've been originally from New Jersey. So I moved over to California a couple years ago. I'm also a part of Game Heads. So I'm learning how to make video games as well.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing some more about yourself. And I would love to know, where did you get your interest for film, screenwriting? Where did that come from?
So as a kid, even though oddly enough, I didn't get to watch a lot of TV, I had to kind of make my own stuff in my head because I didn't have the opportunity to watch like hours upon hours of TV. So I kind of was like, oh, I would like to tell my own stories. And then I kind of was like, I want to see these stories that I was creating on screen. So because I necessarily didn't see myself in these films or in these stories. I grew up with not being able to see myself because everyone I grew up around was not of color. I still am trying to adjust to that as well as make stories more with characters of color because growing up, I didn't get to see that.
No, yeah, I totally get that. I think now with the generation that we're in, we definitely see a lot more of ourselves on screen, but you can never see too much. So I totally understand. And interesting, did your parents, like, what was the logistics around why you were only allowed to watch like around 1 hour of TV? What was that kind of surrounding?
I think growing up, the thing was like, oh, it's gonna rot your brain. You need to do something else other than just sit in front of the TV. You need to like be able to go outside and do other things, and it might be a distraction. But I was like, no. I think my grandma said this to me once that watching TV for young kids is kind of a way to like understand and speak, right? So you're listening to other people from other shows speak, and you're learning from them how to communicate from these characters and shows.
I get where your grandma was coming from. That's kind of smart. I didn't have a limitation of TV growing up. So it's super interesting for me to kind of understand what the narrative is behind that. And so it's super interesting again because like I know people who have said, I was not allowed to watch SpongeBob as a kid, or I was not allowed to watch blah blah blah. And I'm like, what? You guys were deprived of that?
I could say that. I could say that there were limitations of what I can and can't watch. So like I couldn't watch Ben 10, and that was like my sister and I had to like sneak that in. My stepsister and I had to like sneak in that scene of like, let's try and watch this before our mom noticed like what we were watching. We didn't want to get caught. I think was like I love Fairy Odd Parents. That is like one of my favorite ones. Like that was my favorite cartoons growing up. But there were certain ones that like you couldn't watch because they're like, oh, that's not appropriate for kids. Guess what? Now I'm an adult, so I snuck out of my little comfort zone and decided to watch Ed, Ed and Eddie. That was like, oh my god, I couldn't even like look at that. I had to like change the channel if that was ever on.
I think about how much when we were kids, that was so thrilling for us to watch stuff that we had no business watching. Or if you told us, oh, no, you can't watch that, that immediately piques my interest because now I want to watch it. I feel like if we would have used some type of reverse psychology growing up of, oh yeah, sure, go ahead and watch that, but don't watch these like super helpful educational kids shows. No, that's so bad. I feel like that would have been a really good way to trick children in the right way. But what are your
It's like
thoughts?
eat vegetables. It's like tricking them to like disguise their vegetables in their food and be like, eat your vegetables. I think I my friends and I were talking about like Dora, right? That was kind of like that educational show and we're like, oh, we're learning something. But I'm like, I honestly want to watch something else now. Like watch something like my like older. Like watch something that's like more a little bit like crude and a bit funnier.
Hmm.
Even though somehow I was able to watch, I don't know if you know like the cartoon Cat Dog. So I was able to watch that. Somehow I was able to watch that show.
Hmm. Parental priorities are very interesting because no Ben 10, but yes, cat dog. I feel like that's backwards.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's kind of funny how like it was very selective of what you can and can't watch. But then there's like some of those like underlying moments where it's like, oh, I'm gonna let you watch this, even though we clearly knew that that was not an appropriate thing to watch. It kind of reminds me sometimes where the kid would like try and persuade their parent on buying GT6, but like trying to like change the idea of it so that they would buy it. But then the parent would be like, "Oh, it's totally okay. It's totally safe to let my kid play this game," which was totally not appropriate to actually play.
No, yeah. I wonder what the PowerPoints looked like when children were presenting like GTA 5 as like this educational landscape of understanding the real world or blah blah blah, and they knew that was not exactly what they were going for at all. But I need to see that. I wonder if I look it up if there is a kid genuinely like pleading their case for GTA 5 and if it ever worked in a case.
Yeah, it probably has.
Hmm. See, now you put thoughts in my brain. And speaking of thoughts in my brain, I want to talk a little bit more about your other interest as well, which is gaming. So, how did you get into that?
So actually, I like the story aspects of gaming. So I'm a really big high fantasy fan. So I don't play, I watch. So like I'll like watch the videos. My friend has kind of been talking about doing like viewing parties of certain games and like practicing them. I'm thinking it's called Elder Scroll is one that I've seen that I think like the story is cool. And then there's a character in a video game that I thought was like really amazing, and I cannot remember the name of the game, but her name's Melania, and just the way that her voice sounds when it appears on screen, when they just come there, and it's like that's power. That like drew me. It was like, how do you write such a character or a world where that character has such power, and when you like hear them, it's like, yeah, that person means business. That person could like definitely be the final boss and just take me out like in a matter of seconds.
Oh, that's so cool. And it kind of wraps back into your love for film in that way of screenwriting and storytelling and being able to just showcase something. But it's visual. Like it's visual in film too. But in gaming, it's like the storyline really does do a make or break for the game almost a little bit sometimes. For more than film, you have more of that emotional aspect, that human aspect. And then for games, you don't have that, but you have kind of like that added layer of powers or supernatural things that you don't see humans doing because it's a game and it's a different world.
Less money, right? Or not less money, but it's like you can do these things in games because it doesn't require as much, like not effort, but in movies it's like you have to worry so much about money, right? How much money do I need to spend on this effect versus like for a game it's like you're building it up, you're building that moment up where it's like not money. Like to me personally it's not the same. Like I'm not going to be like, okay, how am I going to make this character like, teleport and teleport but then like come out of nowhere. And I feel like if it's like a video game, it's like it's plausible, like way more like able to do that. Um, but I feel like just the believing in the idea of doing something in a game is different from doing it in a movie. I love Jumper. That was like one of my favorite teleportation movies. But I feel like in a game, I have more power. It's going to be like, okay, I have more abilities that I can do in a film, I don't feel like I have that. Like in a game, you have more loose. So it's like you have more of an idea of being like, okay, let me be more extreme than I can be in a movie. And then in a game, you're not risking the lives of the actors. Like the way that you could do it in a movie.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think you helped me connect it a little bit better in my brain than probably how I would have thought about it. And so that leads me to ask you, are you interested in fantasy on the film scale as well of what you would like to create or produce, or are you into different genres?
I'm more interested in fantasy, but I do like other genres. I'm a big history fan. Sometimes I like a little bit of romance. I will say that Hallmark isn't the type of romance that I'm into. I'm not into those like repeated stories of like, oh, this is the same Hallmark movie that just came out in Christmas. I'm not like, oh my God, I have to watch that. I'm a big anime fan. That is kind of one of my biggest kind of places where people will find me is like, okay, either that I'll be reading like a manhwa or something. But I would like to see a lot more fantasy because I feel like the Black community doesn't get that opportunity. Right. And I know that I'm still trying to find out who I am in the Black diaspora because growing up, like I said, I didn't get to see this. Like I didn't interact with a lot of people of color. So my knowledge of being a part of like the Black world is not that high. So it's not like everyone else's. But I do like to see more fantasy. Like I'm a big Dragons fan. But I don't see a lot of Black people writing dragons. Like I loved How to Train Your Dragon, but I didn't get to see myself in that.
Gotcha. And it's super interesting that you talk about fantasy and Black fantasy in film. The first episode of the Intentional Intern podcast was actually with a young woman who talked about fantasy in film from the Black perspective, but a little bit different from yours. And your reasoning is a little bit different. And her name was also Maya. Is that not hilarious? I feel like y'all are just the opposite of each other on the coast.
That's so funny.
And can we talk about like anime real quick? Let's get into it because I am such an anime fan as well. So let's go like fire for fire. What is your favorite anime right now? What's actually, scratch that. What is your top 5?
Okay, so I'm currently watching, I just kind of like got myself back into it, was Cajun number 8. So that's 1. Fearing of the End. That's 2. What is the other one that I'm watching that I'm like, oh my God, I just finished? It's not really truly an anime, but it's animation, but I feel like it has a bit of essence on a bit of anime, a little bit. It is called Blood of Zeus. So that's kind of 1. I've been watching a little bit more of Seven Deadly Sins again. So I've been getting myself back into that. Even though it's not new, but there's some parts where I'm like, oh, I did not see this character be doing this. How did this happen? And then Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer is one of my number 1 favorite animes. And it keeps coming back. And it just doesn't, I know it's going to end. I know it's ending soon, but it's like, okay, it keeps coming back. And I think it ties to me so much because like for my birthday, like I like traveling, but I didn't travel like so far before, like so much by myself. So I went to LA for my birthday last year and I got to go see like the premiere of the new season. And that was like so amazing. And I remember kind of laughing at myself because I was maybe like a foot away from the English voice actress of Nezuko. And she was right there. And I was like, this woman, I love her dress. It really stands out. And I'm like, why does her dress stand out? And as a person who like has to pay attention to detail, I did not use my own like brain. And I was like, wait, that's a really nice dress. And then when she stood up, I was like, oh my God, I could have said hi to the voice actress of Nezuko.
What a moment. And it's so interesting that you talk about Demon Slayer. First of all, none of our top 5, like your top 5, is not like my top 5 at all. And I find that so interesting because you mentioned 2 animes that I've never heard of. So you just put me on. Thank you. But also, even with your reasoning of why you chose those, super interesting to hear about that. What was your first interaction with anime?
Vampire anime. Oh my god. So I don't know if you know, like on like Bing, like back in like the early 2000s, that Bing used to have like this like search engine on the side, and like you could watch like little videos when you were sending emails out. So that was kind of like my first interaction with anime, because I was like, what is this? What is going on? Who's doing what? And then I kind of fell into it, but like I thought I was gonna run away, because the first anime I watched was called Elfen Lied, which I would never like recommend. Anyone under like high school age should not watch Elfen Lied. The amount of gore I thought was gonna like just mess me up. But then I got that was like the first one I got into, but then I got into like Black Butler, even though it's still kind of dark. But it wasn't as traumatizing as Elfen Lied was.
Okay, so your first experience with anime was also trauma related, because my first one was when I was in 6th grade, and the first piece of anime that I had ever watched was the first episode of Attack on Titan.
I can see that. I can see the trauma that can come with that. I think I didn't even watch Attack on Titan until I got a bit older. Like I wasn't even like, I was probably a senior or something in high school at that point. I wasn't like, I was not in middle school being like, let me just go watch this and traumatize myself. I was reading up about him though, the writer, and I thought this was very interesting. And I'm like, I wish I had this lifetime one day when I become like a writer. They didn't believe that the money he had in that account was his. So the bank called him and was like, hey, is this yours? And I was like, the dude made like this most well-known story, and they gave him so much money from this story, and the whole world knows about it now. And I'm like, dude, like that is amazing that you're able to write this story and that your bank is literally not believing that you made this money.
W anime. Even though I haven't finished it yet, I think that would be such a cool story to tell in my lifetime. And I love that he had that experience. I want to be to that level where someone cannot believe I made this much money. Yeah. Okay. New goal set, new goal unlocked. And on that point of goals for you, what are some of your goals that you have when thinking about what film will do for you in the future? So what do you think are some milestones that you want to hit? What are some things that you want to produce, whether that's in film or gaming or marrying them together? What does that look like for you in the future?
So I think one of my goals is definitely to make a movie, make a show, make a web series, something where it's like I had my mark on it and I was able to be like, okay, my stories have come to life. So also I want to like, I also do podcasting a little bit. So I've been testing out and seeing how that works. Because I've been writing the same story, not this with the same characters, but like different things. So what I'm saying is that I've been writing this series of characters since I was probably in elementary school. So over the course of like, I don't know, I've been in school for like 12 years since I like from high school to like 1st grade. So I want those characters to be told. I want more people to see them because they mean the world to me. Right. So I have that as one of my big goals, is to be able to be like, okay, that's something that kids can see and like those characters as much as I do.
Mm. And if you would like to share a little bit about what genre is that you think your movie, or however you decide to bring your characters to adaptation, what form do you think that's going to be in? What genre will that take?
So I think the genre that it would take would definitely be like fantasy. It's like, also I'm a big John Wick fan. So there's going to be like little drops and hints of like some John Wick-esque storytelling in there. So I would like to see it as like its own show. It's probably too high concept to be a live action. I would have to definitely make it animated. I don't want to like put too much on like live action. Like I do love animation, and I feel like you can do more with that than me being like, okay, let me get a whole crew of people, even though I would like the option to have some of the stories like in live action.
Mm-hmm. And is your end goal to be a film director? Is it to be a producer? What does that look like? What do you think will be?
That's kind of like my thing, is like I want to tell stories that that not been told, but in my own way, in another person's point of view. I remember I kind of quote a lot of things from my grandma because she's like awesome. Is that I think it's Sidney Poitier, and I'm not very good with like certain pronunciations of certain names, but he says that there's everything has been done. And I know that he's, long since gone, but I still think that there's still room for something new, right? There's something new to be made, instead of it just being like the same things that we see on TV, the prequels and the remakes. And I think that I want to get into that space where it's like, okay, I have something new. Like, listen to this idea or listen to this concept that might help in changing an idea that people originally had.
Yeah. And so I know I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here when I ask this, but let's do like a live version of that. So if I was the big director sitting in the chair making all the decisions, and you had a great idea and you wanted to pitch it to me, what is your style of communication to get your point across of, okay, this is how I'm going to go in and present this pitch. What are things that you identify and that you communicate to the people to get your idea pushed through? How would you sell it to me? So choose any idea, even if it's an idea of a show that's already been made. It could be Fairly Odd Parents. It could be Ed, Edd n Eddy. Just how would you present a showcase and pilot to me through your writing? What would that look like?
First off, I feel like I would need a PowerPoint. So I would definitely show visuals to get a better grasp for people of what they look like. So that's not like, oh my God, what do they look like if you can't always explain it the best. But I definitely am going to kind of go with Demon Slayer because, as you said, it's the slowest first episode. I think what I would talk about definitely is how some sibling bonds are. And I think for this example that Demon Slayer has one of the best sibling bonds. So I kind of want to talk about that and just the world that it falls into and the characters that you meet because they're so different. And I do like Japan ideas. So I kind of want to explain oh, this is Tanjiro and this is Nezuko, and they've been through so much trauma. And in the real world, everyone probably has gone through so much trauma. And I think I want to compare that. Losing a family member, being on your own is a very big trauma moment.
I think my next question for you is, you talk so much, at least right now, about your grandma. How has your grandma inspired you to continue doing what you do within film and the gaming industry? How does she inspire you? How has she made you who you are today?
So how she's inspired me is to let me do this stuff, not really discourage me as where my previous environment was, is that I was told hey, I can't share these stories. I can't share these ideas. You're weird. So don't talk about them. And I think having my grandma be there and letting me actually let people hear my stories or be okay, can I run this crazy idea past you? Some of them are weird. She says you should stick to normal stuff, but at the same time, she's okay, you can do what you want. And she's really, helped me in the sense where at first I was so scared to move. That was my thing. I was so scared to move to California and I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. And I think that was one of the reasons why I think my grandma helped me a lot in, getting to my own comfort zone. I'm still learning how to be comfortable. I'm still learning how to be a person. And she's really helped me with that. And also I got a dog that now loves me to death. And I don't think he'll ever be happy if I leave him.
That's amazing. I love that your grandma was able to reaffirm you in just doing what you love and not letting people stop you from doing what you love. So it wasn't oh, you can't do this. It was open arms. I would love to see what you're working on. You can do this. And just being that proponent and that person that was able to lift you up and be able to just keep you going. And I can see how you even talking about you moving, getting a dog now, how her changes and just basically unlearning and taking whatever people had made you learn of you can't do this and taking that method of unlearning, giving that power back into you to where now you make your own really good life changes and you're affirmed in yourself of being able to do that. So I'm grateful that you had that person in your life that was able to push you to your next limit and your next journey of your life and what that looks like. I mean, moving is such a big deal. I mean, how did you feel when you were moving? How do you feel now that you've moved?
I was so scared because I think, like I said, I lived in such a small area. I lived in the suburbs. So everyone was white and they knew each other, right? And I think I was like kind of scared of leaving something like that, even though I like knew everyone that I like grew up with and didn't want to kind of leave that. It was really a weight on my heart, right? Because I was like, do I leave the things I know behind to try and make my life better or try and, you know, jump into this pool of God knows what. So now I feel better that I was able to move. Like I'm more like, okay, I've made friends and I'm so grateful that I was able to make friends. And that was like one of the things I was like, okay, will I not be able to do that? Will I not be able to socialize and, you know, see more places that I necessarily don't think I would have seen at home?
Yeah, moving is tough. Even if it's for like a few months, if you're moving permanently, all types of moving is tough. And I know one thing that you're definitely going to face probably within either the film or the gaming industry is moving those. So moving those markets, shifting the needle, or how they say, moving the needle forward, whatever your ideas and your projects are. And so what do you think are some of the most challenging things when it comes to anything surrounding screenwriting, filming, gaming? What do you think are some of the most challenging parts of the industry that you think you will have to overcome?
I think that definitely writer's block to me is one of the worst things like to ever come out in history. When you don't know what to write and you're a writer, it's just so hard to be like, I'm going to write this idea right now. And then you can't, because you can't figure out the continuation. I think also, with, gaming, I like working in teams, but when you don't have the ability to have a team member or people that are going to really work with you, that's what is going to be a challenge. Because some people just want to be there, but not do the work. I don't like growing up, team projects were like the hardest thing as well, because some people just didn't want to do the work. So really just trying to work together and making sure that we build a coherent game. And then with writing as well, it's like, are people going to accept it? Right? You've made this story. And then also like, sometimes I have grammar problems. I'm going to admit that. So I use Grammarly or I use something else to help me. But at the same time, it still feels like, okay, what if I miss something? Do they like it or do they not like it?
That's an interesting point. I never thought about writer's block in thinking about some of the challenges. Normally, thinking about the challenges that people would face within the industry, it usually deals with like the people or the society or the nuances or the culture within something. But you completely brought to my attention a light that I wasn't even looking about. And okay, so let's say you get through all those things, but the granular details of the writer's block, those are things that can happen during your projects or things that can happen when you're thinking of producing another project. And so that's super interesting to me how you're highlighting the different dimensions and the different challenges that not a lot of people would think of, especially people outside of the film industry, which I am. And so I'm curious to know, when you're writing, do you have like a form of best practices, or do you have like a ritual that you do that keeps your writing? Like, what do you have? What's your core of how you write? What are like your pillars?
So I think that the one thing is like, I try and write a page of a new story, like maybe a day. If not, try and get a sentence in. That's like my thing, is like try and get something out before like you forget it completely. Definitely I like to do like historical research. So that's kind of one of my things is like, okay, do I want to research this idea in a certain like country or a certain place that I kind of want to go to? So that's one of my rituals is like definitely researching. And then definitely like for me, I'll sit and watch TV for a hot minute and see if I can get some more idea of how do the characters sound? Like what's the lighting or like what's the personalities that I want for these characters?
You're also looking at the bigger picture too. So literally sitting in front of the TV, I'm going to analyze not just about the writing, but what are some things that can impact the writing and drive it even further. So beyond that sound and like the pitch, how are they making it sound? What lighting is on them? What environment are they in? How does that enhance the already good story that I have sitting here? And so really immersing yourself in just, okay, so this is how it looks like when it's done well and properly. Now I can look at how to incorporate that in my story, even if I don't have, all the fancy cameras and nice sets laying around right now. But if I'm envisioning it in my head, this is what I want it to look like. And when you're thinking about writing for an audience, this is always something so interesting to me, but how do you learn beyond how to capture emotion? Like, I know you guys are probably in your zones thinking, I want people to feel this way when they read my writing. And I'm curious to know, would that change for you if you were doing any type of writing or any type of work in writing within the gaming industry? Would you have the same process or would you make it look a little bit different because it's a different audience?
I feel like still having the character in the room with you is something important to me in the sense where it's like, I can see them, like what they look like to me. And I think that's still a very normal thing for me. And then definitely being like, okay, I like Melania from a video game, or I like, oh my God, like I used to think Sonic was an awesome game, right? Playing Sonic. How does Sonic act, or how does these characters act from another game that I may want to base my character a little bit off of?
Would that be different in translating it to an animation, like in that sense of the word? Because we know movies and anime are two completely different realms, two completely different forms. But often in anime, things are like, okay, in a movie, it could probably be like, if you're scaling it from a 0 to 10, but in an anime, you got like, it's 10 to 100. 0 really doesn't exist. What would you add on top of that could bring that potential emphasis that a lot of animes have?
I think the power, right? It's that aura that character gives, or like, what do they say that makes it seem like, okay, this is a powerful character that they're going to walk in the room. I have, like, for me, when I make my characters, sometimes I mostly am able to envision them in animation form. So for me, I'm already starting out with animation. And then if I need to make it in live action, I'm able to be like, okay, how do I dial it down? So most of the time, it's mostly in animation, and then it can be put in live action. So for example, like I don't know if you've seen Tom and Jerry, they have so much more like ability to go running into things. And it's like, okay, it has to be a little bit more unrealistic. I feel like with animation, you can be a little bit more unrealistic to what you want to do. And when you write that, you can be unrealistic and be able to make your characters a little bit unbelievable.
No, I feel that, especially from the great example given of Tom and Jerry being super unrealistic, because I even think about some of the moments in the Tom and Jerry series where if I'm going through a situation that's in real life, I think back to those moments of like, this is how I would react. So like the way sometimes that Tom and Jerry would just blink at each other, like in disbelief, I feel that way in real life sometimes. And being able to translate that almost as like that's something memorable and a core value of like, I'm blinking at you like Tom and Jerry, they do. Like I'm looking at that invisible camera that's somewhere in a sitcom that they're looking at because they can't believe what's going on right now. Being able to translate those unrealistic things that could never happen in real life, but knowing how much emphasis that they can bring to a character or to a person, that you think about that and your psyche when things are going on with you emotionally or whenever you're in a different space in your life. I like how you tied those two things together, and you're very well versed in being able to articulate verbally and how completely different those might look. I think you've given me a lot of good resources and words to understand how I could connect them better in my head. So I feel like the audience, we're all learning right now together. So I appreciate you for doing that.
I think also, like, when we're thinking about articulation, I'm thinking right now about, for my game heads project that we're currently doing, because I'm learning, like I said, I'm learning how to make video games, so I'm doing the narrative part. We have to show references, so we have to be able to show to the presentators, okay, the presenters, this is what we want our game to look like. This is an example. I think I said I'm not going to spoil it, but I thought about Peter Pan and his shadow, right? That's like an inspiration for an idea. And I think that's like what I kind of like to do, is compare like something that's already been out there, but say like, okay, I want to change it in this way.
And that's so unique, I feel like. Maybe it's just because my brain doesn't think this way when it comes to games and film, but it's super insightful for me to have an understanding of what those unique angles look like in y'all's creative brains and y'all's creative minds. Y'all are accessing some cortex of the brain that I just do not necessarily utilize on a daily basis, and understanding how you would communicate from a gaming perspective what that would look like is super, super cool. Do you ever think there would ever be any crossover within your career of writing and doing anything super unique that might deal with gaming and movies in the future, or gaming and film, or writing in film, and what that would look like?
I'm going to say social media. Because you're able to, tell a story on social media. Like I'm on TikTok a lot. I love the thing. And I see these people who are able to make a short film in like a matter of minutes, right? You can translate a small script and make this video that can go viral from a story. And I would love to do that, but I don't have the space a lot to do that in. So it's like, okay, like some of my classes, I was able to like make a film and stuff, like, but being able to be like, okay, I'm going to go on an adventure in like an epic way. And I can't remember the name of the TikToker right now, but he was like running like through a field with his friends. And it's like, he made that in a matter of like minutes. He made that TikTok, and it's like got probably like 503 views of them just dressing up and running through a field and like being happy. And then like the next second is like, it's a sad moment because those moments are gone. Those are only things in your memory.
See, I'm not a person for like anything dark whatsoever. I'm so like light, happy almost all the time. And horror is one of the things that I stray away from. So in the realm of like dark things that might be intriguing, I've never understood kind of the gravitation towards that, or the attraction towards that. But in the way that you explained it, it almost sounds pretty interesting and almost really mystical in a sense, almost like very mysterious. And I can get down with mysterious. So I think it really is up to how people communicate, like you just did, of communicating what you just talked about. That even made me interested in something where anytime it's been communicated before in a different way, hard pass all the time. I think you have a really good gift of being able to verbally communicate to someone and notify your audience. Like, your audience really well to how you can say something and get people on board. So I think that's going to be a really, really, really good skill and really good strength that you're going to have once you get further through the industry and be able to really articulate how your ideas can essentially change the world, and who knows, change the industry as it is because of how you're able to elaborate on them.
Definitely. I'm gonna like hit you with the truth about, I like dark things, but I don't like horror films. So I'm not a horror film fan, but I like vampires. Vampires are cool. There's some vampires where I'm just like, you're not cool at all. I don't like you. I liked Vampire Diaries growing up, except one character, and I don't like him. And I was like, I never want to see him in the show again. And then I do like the fantasy aspects. I get down sometimes with like, I used to like Lucifer on Netflix. That used to be a very interesting show that I was pretty into because I liked the story. And then the darkness and his comedic actions that he would take. And then like Has-Been Hotel. We know that's a little bit of horror, but like not that bad. Like there are some gory things that I can put up with, but like I think I saw Ouija which was like a horror movie, and I never want to see that again. Like, I could not sleep for 3 days.
Okay, so we might have the same definition of horror, but definitely to different degrees, because how you were explaining it to me earlier, I found that to be horrendous. Your threshold for slightly horrific stuff might be a little bit higher than mine in how you talk about it and discuss it. But good to know that we're like somewhat kind of twins when it comes to being repelled away from horror and the genre and what that looks like. And speaking on genres, I know you mentioned you enjoy history, like film and history and what that looks like. What are some of your favorite things in that arena of like history and film? What are some things that you watch? Why does it appeal to you?
I'm gonna say, like, I'm a big mythology fan. So, like, the history of people creating, like, a way to explain things to me is, like, amazing. I knew, like, maybe a little bit of African history because growing up, I didn't get to see that much. So I was watching about Greek mythology. I know about, like, Norwegian mythologies. I'm not like, it's funny, I am an American, but I think that American history, like, the wars are over talked about. So I try and not like listen to Revolutionary War history. I'm like, I've listened to that so much that I'm not even like into it anymore.
I want to kind of chime in a little bit. I just want to chime in a little bit from your perspective of, I know you said growing up, you didn't have the opportunity to necessarily interact with a lot of people of color. And even speaking on what you just talked about right now, how do you feel like that's kind of affected your outlook on seeing Black people in film?
I think that it's awesome for me to see that. And it's like, but like, I guess when I was a kid, it didn't click. I just thought, oh, they're just people. Everyone's just people that are on screen that are doing like action and fighting. But then when you get older, I think my mom took me to go see Salma one time. And I think that was just so traumatizing for me because I'm not going to say, oh, it woke me up, but I already knew that there was already problems of being a Black person in an all white community. Not being able to be like, I'd be so excited to be like, oh, there's this, I was excited about Blackish one time because there was an episode that I really felt that that's how I feel. And I think when I kind of showed it to my classmate, she was like, oh, I don't want to hear this. I don't care about this. And that really makes you feel like, okay, like, are there moments where that someone else that's not Black cares about you? Like, how do you like make sure like in a story they understand like this is where I'm coming from? Or how do I try my best to make still inclusive enough that people like growing up, I was scared about that, is that they weren't going to like my stuff as much because they didn't have themselves in it. So there wasn't like a lot of white influence. I tried to not do that, but like growing up, like I said, it was mostly all white people. So I couldn't pull from a lot of experiences of being around the Black community and making these characters.
I can see how that would be so damaging to understand, because not only do you not understand why is it this way, but you're just feeling that and you're not able to talk to anybody really about feeling that. And so seeing how passionate you are about it now, of seeing that representation because you are pulling from your own experiences of how that made you feel, it's very enlightening. And I appreciate you really sharing what that was like for you. I want to wrap up this episode by really just talking about everything we recapped. I mean, we talked about anime, we talked about what it looks like to build a foundation for good writing. What does it look like when you're putting that writing into a visual perspective and everything you need to evaluate, but also how you can really connect with characters and what writing means to you and who's helped you figure out what writing really means to you and your roots into writing. And so one thing that I love to ask is, you know, we're both students. We're both always constantly learning, growing, adapting. To any professionals that will listen to this podcast, how can they help you? So what are things that you would want support with right now from those listening?
I think definitely always to improve my story. How do I make them better? I don't want to just be like, okay, I'm the best. This is the best story. I'm like, but there's always room to grow, right? You can make it sound better. How do I, get to these opportunities? How do I make my resume better? How do I get my foot in the door where I'm like, okay, I know some teachers, but it's not enough. Like, I feel like you need more hands-on experience. How do I get that? Where do I do that stuff from where I am? Like, I feel like, how do some writers make it through college? Because, you know, still trying to like finish and pay for college, but like, where can you as a writer get like grants or money to help you continue your skills?
If you could leave us with one piece of advice, so what advice would you give for people who are looking to write and people who are looking to get into the same space as you? From what we talked about and everything you've learned and within your experiences, what is one piece of advice that you would give?
Just do it. Just keep writing. Just tell what you want on a piece of paper. Don't be discouraged. Just do it, and maybe meet some people like online or something where you can share that. Just really just write your story, because you just never know.
I like that. You never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. And so on that note, thank you so much, Maya, for coming on the podcast and speaking so much on your experiences and where you are elevating from now within the writing game and what we can expect from you further. So we'll be on the lookout for any of your upcoming projects, anything. Just thank you so much for being able to showcase to us what good writing looks like, but also what we can look forward to from your writing as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Intentional Intern podcast. We hope you're leaving with fresh insights and a boost of motivation to take on your career journey. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, and share it with your network. Connect with us on LinkedIn and Instagram and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback fuels our next great episode. Until next time, stay intentional, keep growing, and keep shining bright. See you in the next episode.